Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are looking at the new expansion to Hearthstone, Journey to Unguru. So, to look at the cards right now, you have to go into crafting mode and then click over here to filter to just Unguru, and that's how we can see the cards. It's worth pointing out, if they're in blue, that means I have enough dust I could craft them, so they're of a lower rarity. If they're in gray, that just means I don't have enough dust to craft them. Nothing else really necessary to know about that. Last time we looked at the warrior cards, and we've been through all 9 of the character class cards, and we've seen the beginning of some synergies and some ideas. Oddly, it seems like there's at least one beast card in every single character class, which is something we haven't seen before. There very well may be one elemental character in every single character class, so we're going to look out for that. They did seem to have some interest in maintaining the number of murlocs in the game too, which is slightly surprising. I don't believe we've seen any secrets at all in this game, in this expansion, which is interesting. And it's been pretty well balanced between creatures and spells. So the neutral cards now are the cards that they can use in any class. So this is the vast majority of the expansion. That means we need to either hurry up or this is going to take a long time. And one thing I would say is it's kind of a shame they didn't continue the idea of the Cabal cards, so that more of the cards that were specific to a character could be expanded to be specific to a subset of characters, of 3 characters. Instead, every unique card for the warrior can only be played by the warrior, and that's something I prefer they wouldn't have done. Cabal cards are something that were introduced in the previous expansion and not explained very well, but they actually potentially will save some frustration in the long run for Blizzard and Hearthstone players. Alright, starting now. The first card we have is a 1 mana, 2 attack, 3 beast called the Emerald Hive Queen. Your minions cost 2 more. Just quickly thinking about it, I don't think I would want to play this card. Specifically because it's your minions cost 2 more, not all minions cost 2 more. There is a card for, I believe, 2 mana that makes all minions cost 2 more, and that's an interesting card I used to play when I first played Hearthstone. It would irritate the opponents and they would just get bored and leave, get frustrated because it would cost them so much extra mana just to play their characters. But just handicapping yourself so that on the first turn you can have a 2/3, which, by the way, because you have a 2/3 on the first turn, means more than likely your opponent won't be able to kill it on their first turn or their second turn even. So for 2 turns your minions are going to cost more, so you're costing yourself potentially 4 mana to save 1 mana, because a 2/3 otherwise that's a beast is a reasonable card. I'm sure you can find something like that. So I don't think this is a good one to play. Moving on, the next one we have is a 1 mana 2/1 beast. Battlecry, deal 1 damage to each hero. This is a great card, I would say, if you're playing a priest or anybody that's going to have the ability to heal back that 1 damage to your own hero. Even if you're not playing playing a deck or a character that can heal yourself back, it's not too bad to sacrifice 1 health to yourself just to get 1 more attack. And yeah, not a terrible card. Nothing super synergistic with it other than maybe a beast deck, which I think we're going to see a lot of beast here. I'm just looking on this thing. This is a beast, this is a beast, this is a beast, this is a beast, this is a beast. This is an elemental, this is an elemental, this is a murloc. It seems like, at least for this first group, all of these cards are labeled as a certain class. Moving on, next we have is a 1 mana, 1 attack, 2 health elemental called the Firefly. Battlecry, add a 1/2 elemental to your hand. Assumedly, it would cost 1 mana too. This is a good card for an elemental deck. I'm still not seeing... I still haven't seen a spells or cards that really synergize with elementals, but at the very least, this works. The main strategy I've seen with elementals up to this point is there are some cards that have effects that only take effect if you've played an elemental before. So if you had some card like that, you would play this the turn before and have a strategy between 2 turns, which is not something you do too much in Hearthstone, really. You should do it more, but there hasn't been a lot of motivation to do things like that. Usually it's just play by the seat of your pants, and at least it is for me, and probably that's why I lose so much. Next card we have is a 1 mana, 2 attack, 1 health elemental like the previous one, called the Glacial Shard. Has a battle cry to freeze an enemy. So I would only play this in a freeze deck with the mage, because there's really not great reasons to freeze an enemy. It just pauses their attack for 1 turn, assuming your opponent can't silence the fact that they're frozen. Because if you can silence yourself and while you're frozen, then you're no longer frozen, which is kind of usually overkill anyways. So freeze up to this point hasn't been that useful unless you're doing a freeze mage deck, which has several cards that synergize with that, and so maybe then that would work. Next card we have is a 2 mana, 2 attack, 3 health beast called the, was that Galaka Crawler? Yeah, Galaka Crawler. Battlecry, destroy a pirate and gain +1/+1. Now Blizzard's been kind of complaining about pirates, so this is an interesting card. And what it is a variation of a different card that already exists that would destroy a Murloc and get +1/+1. So we're going to have apparently now a series of cards that are beasts that will destroy a different style of card, either pirate or Murloc, and get +1/+1. Not a terrible thought, but highly unlikely you would ever be able to use something like this to destroy your opponent's pirate, because you're never going to really know that you're playing against a pirate deck until it's too late. So more often than not, if you do play this in your deck, you're going to be destroying your own pirate, in the same way that if you play the version that destroyed a Murloc, worked that way too. Next we have is a 2 mana, 2 attack, 2 health beast called the Ravasora Runt. Battlecry, if you control at least 2 other minions, adapt. We still don't know what adapt means, so we assume it's good, and on its face, if it doesn't adapt, it's a average card for 2 mana, 2 attack, 2 health. That's right on the curve. But if you control 2 other minions, is going to be the issue. You're going to have to play this in a deck that has either the ability to summon 2 things for 0 mana, or 2 mana, or 1 mana. And there aren't that many cards that can do that. And because there aren't that many cards that can do that, the synergy between this is not as likely to happen. So this is one of those cards that I think you probably do better. You probably can find something better for 2 mana than this. And often I feel that's the case on these low mana cards, because there's a lot more 1 mana, 2 mana cards than there are 8 mana, 10 mana cards. And usually you can find something that's more likely to work. Here we have a 2 mana, 2 attack, 3 health creature called the Murloc creature called the Rockpool Hunter. Battlecry, give a friendly Murloc +1/+1. This is definitely a decent Murloc to play. There are a couple of Murloc cards that actually don't have anything super useful to them, and I think you could probably replace some of those with this. Like, there's one that summons a 0/1 ooze with taunt for 2 mana. I think you'd probably want to play this more, but nothing hugely amazing about this. But it's a good Murloc, and if you're playing a Murloc deck, you're fine. Next one we have is a 2 mana, 1 attack, 2 health beast called the Stubborn Gastropod. It has taunt and it's poisonous. Now, they really should be a teachable moment here, and they should change where it says poisonous to venomous, because the idea here is something that bites you and has poison in their bite is venomous. Something that's poisonous you would have to eat. Now, in the case of a snail, you might eat a snail and it might be poisonous, but in the case of snakes and all the other things that have had poisonous labels on them in this game, they should be labeled as venomous. And I think it would be a good teachable moment if they said this snail was also venomous, and so the snail bites you. Because, well, that's frankly just how it works. So I think they should correct that, just for accuracy's sake. People get that wrong all the time, and it's not a big deal, but words do have meaning. Next card we have is a 2 mana, 1 attack, 1 health elemental called the Volatile Elemental. Deal 3 random damage deal 3 damage to a random enemy minion. And that's a death rattle. The weird thing about this is I don't think people would be highly motivated to ever kill this character. You would almost certainly have to play this on the second turn, and then on the third turn attack something that would have to be like a 4 health and get it down to a 3 health, and then have the death rattle kill it. And I just think there's probably better ways to kill something with 4 health in 2 turns than summon a 2/1/1 elemental. And so unless there's some synergy with this elemental, I don't think I'd want to play this card. Going back to this card, I think I probably would play this card. This is actually a very useful card. I forgot to mention that, because it's a nice defense card that guarantees killing anything that attacks it. And potentially, if it gets attacked by a 1/1 creature, it would kill that 1/1 creature, and then the next creature that attacks it would also be killed. So you might potentially, on the second turn, eliminate 2 characters with a defensive character, which is not bad at all. Moving on, we have a 3 mana, 0 attack, 3 health creature called the Devilsaur Egg. It's slightly surprising they didn't create a new classification of dinosaurs or devilsaurs, whatever they want to call them. Instead, they stuck with beasts and elementals. So there's now a lot more beasts in the game with this expansion. Instead of separating them out and saying beasts are animals that actually exist in the real world, and dinosaurs are creatures that used to exist in the real world but don't exist anymore, and dragons are their own separate thing. Because you could easily make the argument that dragons are also beasts, but they came later and they have their own separate group. But they chose not to do it, so I'm not super upset about it, but it is an interesting choice. So this death rattle summons a 5/5 Devilsaur. So for the third turn you play this, people aren't going to be heavily motivated to attack it. It doesn't have taunt. So then you probably are going to have to spend at least 2 more mana to kill it yourself, because it can't attack. So you're going to have some kind of spell somewhere that does it. And so at that point you've probably spent 5 mana or more to get a 5/5 Devilsaur. So I don't think this one's actually worth it. It seems like it's going to cost you more often than it's worth. Next we have is a 3 mana, 3 attack, 1 health creature called the Egg Napper, and boy does that look like a Ninja Turtle to me. It has a death rattle to summon 2 raptors, 2/1/1 raptors. So you summon this on the 3rd turn, almost certainly somebody kills it before it does anything, and then you get 2/1/1 raptors. No, I don't think I'd want to play this card either. It seems just too risky. It seems almost more than half the time you would lose this guy without him doing any damage to the hero or any of the other minions, and just be left with 2/1/1 raptors. So you're spending 3 mana then to summon 2/1/1 raptors, which should cost 2 mana, so it's just too expensive. Next card we have is a 3 mana, 2 attack, 2 health beast called the Giant Wasp. It has stealth and it's poisonous / venomous. Here's the thing. If you were going to make a poisonous deck, I don't know specifically why you'd want to do that, but if you were going to do that, or if you were going to make a beast deck, and there's a reason for this, I suppose in a beast deck a lot more than a poisonous deck, I could see it being worth it. For it being slightly low on health and attack, you're getting stealth and you're getting poisonous. You're getting 2 things for the loss of 2 things. So that seems like that's a fair trade if you want it in a beast deck where you might potentially increase its health, increase its attack, or in some other way work it out. But otherwise, I don't think, like, just making a poisonous deck seems crazy. I don't think that would do much other than irritate your opponent and still they would win. But in a beast deck, I think that works. Moving on, the next one we have is a 3 mana, 3 attack, 3 health creature called the Gluttonous Ooze. Battlecry, destroy your opponent's weapon and gain armor equal to its attack. Sorry, I've been talking too long today. The problem with this ooze is the same problem with the other oozes. Weapons just aren't used enough in this game yet for this to make sense. Like, the best case scenario would be that your opponent plays the one weapon that has a 7 attack and 1 durability, and then they don't use that weapon at all, and then the next turn, and somehow they play that weapon like on the 2nd turn, which I don't think they can, but let's say they did, and then on the 3rd turn you play this and you get 7 armor and destroy the weapon. It turns things around, but it's so unlikely to ever happen. I don't think it's worth it. And since the ooze isn't a beast character and there's no special thing here, unless there's a future synergy for playing ooze and you can make this like some kind of future ooze deck that you can't do right now, yeah, this is not one to really play. It's kind of funny. It's like, you got a Ninja Turtle here, you got ooze here. They could probably do a Tavern Brawl at some point just centered around the Ninja Turtle, comic books, cartoons, whatever, if they wanted to, but then they might get in trouble for doing that too. So next character we have is a 3 mana, 4 attack, 8 health card that is sorry, somebody just commented live. They're asking if Ring Guru is coming out tomorrow. Technically, I think yes it is, because it's past 1:43 in the morning, so tomorrow at after midnight on the 6th it is coming out. So take that, and he's warrior will play ooze. Okay, I don't know what that means, but I've got to go forward. I'm not supposed to be commenting while I'm recording this because this is supposed to be a more universal coverage. So sorry for that. I will cover your questions after this recording going forward. So we were looking at the 3 mana, 4 attack, 8 health character called the Humongous Razor Leaf. We've seen several other Razor Leafs, and so this is the, well, we've seen 2 other Razor Leafs really, cards, so this is the 3rd, and it can't attack. So here's the problem with this card. On itself, it looks overpowered, but then you're probably going to have to play the Ironbeak Owl to silence it, which costs, I believe, 2 mana. And so when you put it like that, you've got a 5 mana because you've got to silence it so it can actually attack. Otherwise, this card is worthless because it doesn't have taunt. Maybe you could do something else to give it taunt, and then it would be a 4/8. But again, that still probably costs 2 mana. So I'd say on average, this is actually more like a 5 mana for 8. When you balance that out, you're talking a 5 mana for a 6/6. It kind of makes sense, but only if you're playing a heavily silenced deck or a deck that has a bunch of taunt things in it. So that probably in practicality not going to get played. Moving on, the next card we have is a 3 mana, 2 attack, 3 health elemental called the Ingenious Elemental. Death Rattle, add 2 1/1 elementals to your hand. What's strange here is all the previous elemental cards have had things that would trigger if you played an elemental before. This card actually triggers when it dies to give you more elementals, which I suppose still kind of works towards that synergy, but I've yet to see it really snap into place. There are some elemental cards, they do seem to like that you played an elemental the turn before, usually that's what they're looking for, but none of them are really powering each other up in any way, or adapting, or doing anything odd. So I think you very easily could make an elemental deck and discover it doesn't really do anything that useful. Moving on, the next card we have is a 3 mana, 3 attack, 2 health Murloc called the Primafin Lookout. Battlecry: if you control another Murloc, discover a Murloc. Not bad. What I'm wondering here is, if you discover a Murloc in a standard game, are you given the opportunity to play a wild card or discover a wild card in standard, or do they limit what you can discover in standard to standard cards? I bet they do, and that probably means that any card that discovers anything in standard has a completely different chance of being useful than playing that same card in wild, which is interesting. An interesting thought to at least think about. But on the face of it, discovering a Murloc is definitely going to be useful on the 3rd turn. To get a 3/2 Murloc is a great turn. This card will definitely go into my Murloc deck. Moving on to the next card, we have a 3 mana, 2 attack, 2 health beast called the Pterodax Hatchling. Battlecry: it adapts. Again, we don't know. We don't know what adapt is doing, so it's probably going to be alright. It's probably going to be good to have adapt. I think I'll probably end up making one deck that is just beasts and adapts together, and we'll see what happens with that when the expansion comes out. The next card we have is a 3 mana, 1 attack, 4 health character called the Stonehill Defender. He has taunt, and his Battlecry discovers another taunt minion. So there was one quest in one of the characters, I believe the warrior, to play 7 taunt minions. Definitely would want something like this in there. In fact, if you're playing a taunt deck in general, this card's good. You have a 1/4 with taunt, which isn't bad for 3 mana in the first place, and you get a 2nd taunt minion. And yeah, that seems very doable, very playable card. Next we have is a 3 mana, 1 attack, 5 health elemental with taunt, and this is one more of these tar creatures. It seems like they're doing a full theme here of tar creatures at different attacks and different healths, and so the idea, I guess, is the tar slows down your opponents, so during your opponent's turn it has +2 attack, which makes this a very useful tar creature that you might want in your deck no matter what, and the fact that it's an elemental just helps a little bit more too. I don't know how far they can really expand the elemental idea though, because if you've got earth, wind, fire, water, air, tar right now, I mean, you throw in Heart and you've got Captain Planet, and with tar added into that mix, but what other elementals can you really create until you start going into subgenres of, like, maybe there's a sulfur creeper, maybe there's a mercury creeper, maybe there's a water creeper. Water is by default, but maybe you go with smog, maybe things. They're going to have to get pretty imaginative if they want to go further with the elemental idea, and I don't still see any synergy on calling certain characters elementals yet. Moving forward, though, we still have a lot of cards to go through, so I need to rush a little bit here. We have a 3 mana, 3 attack, 3 health beast called the Thunder Lizard. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, adapt. So here's an interesting card in itself. It's fine to play right now, and it's a beast, but you would play it in an elemental deck. So maybe there's some synergy going on where we would make a deck that is elemental and beasts. Maybe that would work. Maybe you need to do like 1/3 of the deck is elementals, 1/3 of the deck is beast, and 1/3 of the deck is adapts. Yeah, until we can really get our hands on these cards and play them and try them out, we don't have enough understanding of what these, of how these are going to play. I can almost eliminate elementals and say that they're probably not worth playing unless I see some huge synergy unlock with these neutral cards going forward. But the adapt cards, definitely need to try adapt cards. Definitely need to see what kind of beast deck I can make now that I have so many different options on beasts. But moving forward, the next card we have is a 3 mana, 3 attack, 3 health beast called the Vicious Fledgling. After this minion attacks a hero, adapt. So almost certainly, depending on what adapt actually does, almost certainly would want to play a card like this if you've got room for a card like this. It attacks the first time, it adapts, I assume. It attacks the second time, I assume it adapts again. So you might have something that is a 12/12 by your 6th turn, if that's what adapt does. Or you might just have something that has can only adapt once, and then adapting a second time doesn't do anything. But I don't think that's the case, because we've seen cards that say adapt twice, and if something can adapt twice, that means something crazy. The only thing I could think is maybe there's a Vicious Fledgling, and then there's some kind of vicious something else not called a fledgling, and maybe when it adapts it changes into that card. But then that doesn't explain how you adapt all the previous cards, because there aren't 3 different levels of cards for everything previous, unless they've made that and added it to the game. And if they did add it to the game, that would have been a lot of work. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 3 attack, 4 health creature called the Bright-Eyed Scout. Not seeing a lot of spells here for neutral cards so far. Battlecry, draw a card, changes cost to 5. Again, this is one of those cards that only works well if you're playing like an all legendary deck. It would make a lot of sense if most of your cards cost way more than 5 to play this on the 4th turn, and then the next turn play a usually 10 mana card for 5, and makes sense. And you still get a 3/2 creature on this, but that's kind of the only time it makes sense, is if you have a ton of legendaries and usually if you have a ton of legendaries, you have enough cards to think of a better strategy than that. So it's kind of one of these cards that's it's working to a method of playing that nobody probably should play. But I like the idea. I like that it's there. It's just I don't think most people should play that. Moving on, we have a 4 mana, 3 attack, 3 health elemental called the Fire Plume Phoenix. Battlecry, deal 2 damage. Well, nothing special about it being elemental there, and for 4 mana it is a little bit under on the attack and health, but beyond that it's definitely going to, like, I think it's gonna be alright, but probably not that great. Again, this is one of those cards where it's like, do you have something better? If you don't, then sure, for 4 mana play a 3/3 character, which should be 3 mana, and then for that 1 extra mana do 2 damage, which I could easily see a 3 mana card that gives you a 3/3 and a 1 mana card that does 2 damage. And it's just kind of combining 2 previously existing cards. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 5 attack, 4 health beast called the Gentle Megasaur. Battlecry, adapt to your Murlocs. So again, don't know what adapt means, but if I was playing a Murloc deck, I think I'd probably consider having 2 of these in the deck, depending on what adapt does. Ignoring adapt, though, this still probably is a decent card to play in a by itself, but actually it's probably a terrible card to play in a beast deck, because if you're making a beast deck, you won't have any Murlocs, so I don't think I would potentially play this if I was just trying to play beasts. There's so many other beasts to pick from right now. See, we're almost to 5 here of potentially 10, so we're closer to halfway done than I thought I was. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 3 attack, 4 health legendary card called the Spirit Singer Umbra. After you summon a minion, trigger its death rattle effect. So if I was making a death rattle deck, which you kind of need to do to do the daily quests, this is definitely one I would want to get. Sadly, it's a legendary card, so if I don't get it when I open those 55 packs when the expansion comes out, I would have to use 1600 dust to get it. And this is not anywhere near the top of my list of legendary cards I would use dust to create, unfortunately. Like, even if I was trying to play a Death Rattle deck, you have to know the limitations of Death Rattle decks. They're not going to be big winners. They're not going to get you up to rank 1 in legendary there. So it's one I want, but not one I would pay for. It's one I would play in a Death Rattle deck. It's not one I would not play in a Death Rattle deck, because it's frankly not very strong. You could get a 4 attack, 4 health for 4 mana otherwise. And remember, most of the Death Rattle cards that do have effects that would trigger, some of those Death Rattle triggers wouldn't do anything helpful at all anyways. Like Fugan and Stalag in particular would not trigger correctly with this, and several of the others might trigger and just return the card to your hand, so you would summon it and it would just immediately go back into your hand, so that's not useful either. Next card we have is a 4 mana, 2 attack, 6 health beast with Taunt, the Stegodon. So when you balance this out to 3/5, 4/4, you've got basically a 4 mana, 4 attack, 4 health creature with Taunt equivalent. And so that's right there on the power curve. That's an average card, with just the trade-off that you're getting more Taunt, which you probably would want more health for a Taunt defensive creature anyways. Maybe you could find a better Tar elemental character that would work better and give you more for 4 mana. But if you don't have that card, this is a good second instead. Moving on, next we have a 4 mana, 3 attack, 3 health creature called the Vorax. He's a legendary. After you cast a spell on this minion, summon a 1/1 plant and cast another copy on it. Well, this is an amazingly interesting card because there's plenty of cards that say on your 5th turn you could play this and then play a 1 mana spell that gives this +1/+1. And so then this would become a 5/5. And then you would have a 3/3 card, plant card, also summoned. And there's possibility here. I'd have to really look at all the spells that you could do something even crazier than just increasing the attack and health of this guy and getting a 1/1 thing and filling up your field over the course of the next several turns with 1/1 plant creatures too. So there's a lot of opportunity here to grow. Ironically, I think intentionally here, the plant has a lot of opportunity to grow. So I think I would want the Vorax, maybe not anywhere near my top picks as far as legendary cards again, but it's a lot higher than this one, definitely. So hopefully I'll get that one. Hopefully I get all the legendary cards and I can just use dust to get the cards I don't get in this expansion, but that's highly unlikely to happen. Next we have is a 4 mana, 3 attack, 5 health creature called Tolvir Stone Shaper. Battlecry: if you played an elemental last turn, gain taunt and divine shield. So you would definitely only play this card in an elemental deck. And even when you're playing this in an elemental deck, you're still paying a lot. Let's say last turn you played a 1 mana elemental card, just 1 mana, because we haven't seen any 0 mana elemental cards that I recall. I don't think we saw any. So that effectively makes this a 5 mana for 3 attack and 5 health with taunt and divine shield. That's a lot to pay for something that should probably be closer to a 5/5 with taunt and divine shield. For maybe just a 5/5 with taunt and not divine shield. If this is worth playing, it's barely worth playing in an elemental deck. I'm still not sold that you should play an elemental deck yet, though. Next we have a 5 mana, 8 attack, 8 beast. So already, without even knowing what this says, I think this one's a good card to play, and it's an epic, so you have a decent chance of getting it too. It's called the Bitter Tide Hydra. Whenever this minion takes damage, deal 3 damage to your hero. Okay. So here's the slight problem with this. You probably still could play this card just fine. But what you have to think is, you play this on the 5th turn, and let's say your opponent has 7/1/1 creatures somehow on their 5th turn. So they attack here and bring this down to an 8/1. That 7 damage that's done to him by 7/1/1 creatures does 3 damage to your hero. So 7, 14, 21 damage to your hero, making this a really, really terrible scenario for you. But it's a gamble, and I've seen people play cards like this and gamble and being willing to do it. It's highly unlikely that on the 5th turn your opponent would have 7/1/1s. But let's say he had a 7/7 and a 1/1. Well, then on his next turn he would attack and do 7 damage, making this an 8/1, and that would do 3. And then he would attack with a 1/1, and that would kill this, and that would do 6. So you're taking at minimum 6 damage if this guy dies. And potentially this won't even have done 8 damage to your opponent. So then when you start to run the numbers and think about it, if this can't do at least a couple of attacks on average, it's actually not worth it, because you're effectively playing 5 mana and 6 damage minimum every time you play this card. And so you're gonna have to, through experience and through gameplay, see, is 5 mana plus 6 damage worth doing potentially 8 or 16 or 24 damage on average. Sure, in 4 turns, if they can't kill this, you will win almost certainly, but it's a bit of a gamble. But sometimes gambling pays off. So that one's iffy. You're gonna have to really see in practicality how well that works. Next one we have is a 5 mana, 5 attack, 5 health creature called either Elias the Trailblazer, or yeah, I think that's Elias. And so 5 mana, 5 attack, 5 health by itself as a legendary. It's a good card. The extra is Battlecry, shuffle a sealed Unguru pack into your deck. What in the world are they saying with this one? If this is how I understand it, and I don't believe this is true, I think this card is the one card you have to play in this. It's got to be in every single deck you play. Because there's 2 ways to translate this. And the way I'm translating this is, if you play this, there will be a sealed Unguru pack in your deck. Which means if you draw that pack, at the end of your game, you will be able to open another pack. Packs are 100 gold. They're roughly $1, depending, unless you're in the UK or Europe, where they raise the prices on you. So the idea that maybe every single game you have a chance of getting another pack and getting more cards is amazingly fascinating. This would be so out of character for Blizzard, and so amazing as an idea in a card game, a digital card game. Something you could never do in a real world card game is say, if you play this card, we will give you a chance at winning a new card pack. That would be amazing. However, if we're going to come back to reality for a second, and even though I'm translating it as that, and that would be an amazing thing, and that would be way more generous than I've ever seen Blizzard. Blizzard's been very greedy and totally not wanting to give anything free to Hearthstone players in particular. They really suck about it. What I imagine this really means is that you play this and you get 5 random Unguru cards in your deck. And I don't think I would play it if it's that. But I'm certainly, if I get this legendary card, going to play it at least once to find out what the deal is. The problem is the phrasing here. If it was going to say shuffle 5 Unguru cards into your deck, why not just say that? Shuffle 5 random Unguru cards into your deck. Why say shuffle a sealed Unguru pack into your deck? And see, maybe it's something in between where you get the pack, and when you draw it, right then 5 cards open and go into your hand. That would be slightly interesting too as a expansion. I definitely want to see this one played. Moving on though, we have a 5 mana, 4 attack, 7 health beast called the Nesting Row. Battlecry, if you control at least 2 other minions, gain taunt. This one might be playable in the taunt deck or beast deck. Particularly in a beast deck, you have a good chance of having 2 other minions by your 5th turn anyways. And a 4/7 with taunt is good for 5 mana. In fact, like a 5/6 or 6/5 for 5 mana, even without taunt, is a pretty good deal. So that's definitely one worth playing, I think. Next we have is a 5 mana, 4 attack, 5 health elemental called the Servant of Kalamos. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, discover an elemental. This elemental stuff just keeps on going, and unless there was something else to the elementals that they got cheaper every time you played an elemental, I don't see the idea here. I'm missing something behind their strategy, because this feels like a strategy that's not that good or won't work that well. But they did similar things with the Jade Golem, where it was just a case of Jade Golems were said you would summon a Jade Golem, and it took me quite a long time after the Jade Golems were introduced into the game to realize that Jade Golems actually are 1 attack and 1 health bigger every time you summon another Jade Golem. So maybe we will find out that there's a side effect to elementals that just isn't getting mentioned here, where they actually do cost 1 less or get stronger in some way. And then there is like an actual reason to have a deck full of elementals to pull off their requirements to get more elementals. Next we have a 6 mana, 8 attack, 8 health elemental called the Frozen Crusher. After this minion attacks, freeze it. So here's a great card to play in a silence deck, and a terrible card, I think, to play in anything else. The idea here is for 6 mana you're getting an 8/8, so you're getting a good discount. But then you would have to probably play the Ironbeak Owl for 2 mana to silence it, so no longer does it freeze itself after it attacks. So then effectively you are playing an 8/8 mana cost for an 8/8 creature, which is just on the curve but requires you to draw 2 cards, which means it's actually slightly less likely to happen, and so this card's not really worth playing unless you're playing it in an elemental deck, and something about the elemental deck synergizes or does something that we haven't seen yet, which I keep saying that, but I mean, I'm really confused about the elementals right now. Next we have is a 6 mana, 6 attack, 6 health legendary character called Himmet Jungle Hunter. Battlecry: destroy all cards in your deck that cost 3 or less. This is an interesting card in itself, because this card may be the first card in Hearthstone that would allow you to manipulate your deck in a amazing way. So on itself, it's kind of not worth playing, but there's a strategy that could be played here that you would have to really think about, because it's a very dangerous strategy. What you could do is you could have this card for 6 mana in your deck, and then you can have one other card that you're looking for, which I assume would have to be some kind of winning strategy card. Totally. Something that you could play on the 7th turn and almost always guarantee victory. And I'm not sure exactly what that would be. I don't think it would be like Kel'Thuzad or no, what's the other one? Cthulhu? Yeah, Cthulhu is probably the closest one that you would think about, and I still don't think even on the 7th turn you could play Cthulhu and win. There's the League of Explorers card that would, when you play Elsa Starseeker, that puts a map to the Golden Monkey card in your deck, and then if you played the map to the Golden Monkey card, you would get all legendary cards. Reno Jackson, if you have no duplicates in your deck, you restore your health. So several cards would work this way. And then you would have to fill the rest of your deck with cards that cost 3 or less. There might be some spell cards that cost 7 or more that might be game changers too. But this is an incredibly crazy strategy for the pros only. But yes, if you played this on the 6th turn and all of your deck had only 3 cost cards plus something that costs 7 or more, or 6 or more even, Well, it could be anything above 4 or more, actually. And that was a game changer. You play this on the 6th turn, it eliminates every single card in your deck. There's only one card left to draw. Next turn, you draw that card you wanted. But that card has to be a game changer. It has to be a game winner, not even a game changer. It has to be guaranteed victory if I play this card. And I don't know if there is something like that. If they were going to make something like this, they almost needed to make it a card that was 7 mana that does damage to your enemy hero equal to half of as many or as many cards as are left in your deck. So if you have no cards left, it does 30 damage to the enemy hero. That's the only way this card really works, is something like that. And we haven't seen that card yet. But sometime in the future, this card may be part of some crazy synergy. Moving forward, we're taking too long again. We have a 6 mana, 8 attack, 2 health beast called the Sabertooth Stalker. It has stealth. Let's see, how does this balance out? If we take 2 over here, then it would be a 6/2. So this effectively is a 5/5 for 6 mana with stealth. So you're paying 1 extra mana for stealth. But in this configuration, it's actually an 8/2 with stealth. So here's the thing. This might very well be playable, particularly in the beast deck, since it's a beast, because there's not a great number of times that people do 2 damage to all enemies. And as long as it keeps its stealth, it can't be targeted, I don't believe, by spells. So this would survive at least 2 attempts to kill it, more often than not. And so if you wanted to play this on the 6th turn, and then wear down the opponent during up to that point, to the point where your opponent only has 8 health, I could see having this as the backup solution to it. But otherwise, it's just going to take up space on your field, and you won't ever be able to attack the hero. Or as soon as you do attack the hero, you're only going to get 1 attack, and then they'll definitely get rid of it. But it's not a terrible card. It depends on your other cards and what strategy you're playing for. Always, but yeah, that might have some use. Moving on, the next card we have is a 7 mana, 6 health, 6 attack, 6 health elemental called the Blaze Caller. Battlecry, if you played the elemental last turn, deal 5 damage. This is the first elemental that really seems to feel like it's synergizing. You can pick where the 5 damage is going, it seems. So for 1 extra mana, and the fact that in the previous turn you would have had to play another elemental, so basically at least 2 extra mana, you can deal 5 damage. 2 mana to do 5 damage is a little bit of a deal, not a great deal. Again, a card I'd play in an elemental deck, but nothing else. It seems to be happening a lot with elementals. They seem to be a character class that is not very useful, at least as on the face of them right now. Next card we have is a 7 mana, 5 attack, 7 health beast called the Sated Threshodon? Threshodon? Sated meaning he's not hungry. He's, which that doesn't make sense, but okay. Sated Threshodon. Oh, I get it now. He's called a Sated Threshodon because it has a death rattle to summon 3 1/1 Murlocs when he dies. So basically this guy ate 3 Murlocs and he will spit them back out when he dies, is the implication there. This is slightly a decent move. The problem with it though, and what would almost certainly knock this out of a Murloc deck, is that if you're by the 7th turn not close to or have already won with Murlocs, you're probably not gonna win. Murlocs are very early game victories. So by the 7th turn, if you played this and your opponent gets a 7th turn and can do 7 damage and kill this, he's probably also capable of doing 7 damage just to your face and winning. So I don't think you can actually play this in a Murloc deck. And that being said, I don't think you can play it in a Beast deck either, because there's really not a reason to. It's not the best deal. For if it was just a 7 mana, 7 attack, 7 health with no death rattle and a beast, then it would be a good deal. But as it is, I don't see it playing well in Murlocs. I don't see it playing well with beast. Moving on, the next card we have is a 7 mana, 4 attack, 8 health wind elemental called Storm Watcher, and it has Wind Fury. So Wind Fury means it attacks twice. So effectively it's for 7 mana and 8 attack with 8 health elemental. But it does give you the option to attack twice, so you might one time attack a minion and one time attack the hero, which gives you more opportunity for actually a mana less. It's actually a very good card. Plus the elemental thing might work well too. So that's one to definitely consider. Let's see, that's the first Wind Fury we've seen in the expansion. Interesting. The other thing here is I haven't seen a single spell, have I? Like, not a single spell has been added to the neutral. It's all just characters. Are there no spells in neutral? I'll have to check this at the end because it seems odd. It seems odd that they wouldn't have any neutral spells in Unguru at all. But I guess it might be easier to make characters than spells, or maybe they're just trying to focus away from characters for Unguru and instead trying to make this. Hey, and guess what just happened? Well, good news, I guess. Either the game just bugged out and is going to let me craft this with dust, which it hasn't been doing up to this point, or the servers just went live and I can open in the card packs. So we'll see if that's the case at the end of the live stream here. But going forward, next card is a 7 mana, 5 attack, 6 health beast called the Volcanosaur. Battlecry adapt, then adapt. So how is that different than adapting twice? And see, since we still don't know what adapt does, I'm really not certain about this one. Because if this makes us a 6/7 or something equivalent to that, then it's still a little behind the curve for 7 mana. But then if it makes it a 7/8, it's ahead of the curve. And so I think this is a card worth playing in a beast deck particularly, but until we find out what adapt does, we don't know. See, this says coming soon here, but this says create. So that's like a bug. And this says coming soon. And this is Journey to Unguru. Interesting. So then the question is, should I cheat and craft the card right now for 100 dust? Probably not. That'd probably be a very stupid thing to do. But we've been seeing nothing but coming soon up to this point. And this says coming soon, but oops. I think Blizzard messed up there. Next card we have is an 8 mana, 7 attack, 7 health beast called the Charged Devilsaur. We've seen several cards called Devilsaur in previous versions and current versions. Charge, can't attack heroes this turn. So in general, this special ability is not that great. Like, it's for 8 mana, it's a 7/7 when it should be an 8/8. And it can have charge, but it can only attack things that aren't the hero. And I can't silence it, because if I silence it on the first turn so that the battle cry doesn't happen, which you can't. There's really not a card that silence battle cries anyways. They just happen when you summon them. This is kind of under the curve. And I don't think I'd want to play this one. I think there's a better Devil Soar out there than this, honestly. Yeah, and I don't see this being strategically the right one. Moving on, we're almost done at this point. Next card we have is the 8 mana, 4 attack, 8 health dragon called the Primordial Drake. I do believe this may be the first dragon we've seen. If not the first, it's the second one. It has taunt. Battlecry, deal 2 damage to all other minions. The thing about dragons as a strategy is they don't kind of synergize with themselves very well. They kind of instead are selfish. So you'll have a dragon that says, if you're holding a dragon, give the dragon you just summoned +1/+1. But you won't have a dragon that says, give another dragon +1/+1. So while they do work with each other, they kind of only work with each other by being around each other or having one in your hand. Usually it's if you're holding a dragon, give +1/+1. And since they've never really got around that, building a dragon deck, I've never been able to find one myself that I like, that really synergizes. So I wouldn't particularly ever say do a dragon. There's no quest right now to play a dragon. I don't feel like there's enough dragons in the game yet either, so I'm glad they're adding it. That being said, this is a pretty terrible card. It should be like 6 mana to do 2 damage and have a 6 attack, because then if this was 6 mana and 6/6 and did 2 damage, that would be good. Or if this was 6 mana and 4/6 and do 2 damage, that would be good. But because this is 8 mana, if we balance this out, it becomes a 7/6, I believe. 6 if you take away the 2 damage equivalent here, and then you have to throw in the taunt, and there's a lot of calculations there, and in the end it still doesn't feel like it's worth it. Moving on, the next card we have is an 8 mana, 5 attack, 4 health creature called the Tortillane Primalist. Battlecry, discover a spell and cast it with random targets. What's weird in the phrasing of this is that cast it with random targets with an S. Either a spell is going to have a random single target, or so it should say with a random target, or the spell is going to say specifically randomly do like 15 damage between the minions. That was Volcano that we saw earlier. I suppose it might do some weird things if you discovered a spell that was supposed to say do 4 damage to all enemy minions, and this card instead decided to do 4 damage to half of the enemy minions and half of your minions. That would be an interesting way to twist it, but I don't know if that's really how it's going to apply itself. That being said, for 8 mana, I can't imagine playing this. Not under a mage deck, not under anything. It seems just kind of crazy for a 5/4 on itself. Not really worth it. Next card we have is a 9 mana, 6 attack, 10 health beast with taunt, the giant mastodon. Let's see. So 7, 9, 8, 8. So it's equivalent of an 8 attack, 8 health with taunt for 9. A little bit expensive at 9 mana, but not terrible. Probably good enough to play in a beast deck just so you have something that costs that much and is that big. But there very well might be a 9 or 10 mana beast out there that's already better than this. Seems like we're seeing a lot of these bigger neutral cards getting added and not really having much value, but they're lower rarity, so this common card probably isn't as good as a legendary or an epic card or a rare card, but it might get played more often by players that don't have the epic or legendary cards, and that's a fair way for them to kind of balance out the meta of the play, is just to say, hey, new players, we're going to give you slightly worse versions of cards, but you're going to have a much higher chance of actually getting them. Next card we have is the 9 mana, 5 attack, 5 health elemental called Ozruk. It has taunt, and it gains +5 health for each elemental that you played last turn. Okay. So you play this on the 9th turn, and let's say on the 8th turn, highly unlikely you would play more than, well, you could in theory play 8/1/1 elementals if there are 8/1/1 elementals in the game. I don't believe there are 8/1/1 elementals in the game though. So I would say, on average, at best, planning to play Ozruk in the next turn. Let's say you play 3. Well, then you'd have a health of 15. That seems about average. That seems about what they're... well, no, you'd have a health of 20 because 3 would be the 15 plus the 5 you already have. 4 would be 25, of course. If you played 2, it would be 15. That seems reasonable too. If you just played 1, it would still be a 5/10. Sadly, the problem here is not the health. Like, you probably could plan for a strategy here and do a 9th turn here. But on the 9th turn, having a 5 attack creature is kind of useless. Either you've been playing very badly and you're about to lose when you play this card, or you've been playing well and you should win, and then you play this card and it's the wrong choice because it doesn't give you much more attack. So probably the last elemental in the that we've in this expansion, and I still don't understand elementals at all. I don't get them. I don't think you should play an elemental deck at this rate. Finally, going on, we have a 10 mana, 7 attack, 14 health beast called the Ultrasaur, and I think he's a pretty good card to play. There's nothing special about him. When he bounces out, let's say you take the 3 from this, it's a 10-11 or 11-10 character for 10 mana, so it's above the curve. It's a beast, so it would definitely play in a beast deck, and I imagine you could probably find some ways to even reduce the cost on you. So Ultrasaur, if you've got nothing better, or if you've got no strategy that really builds to anything better, Ultrasaur seems like it's the right thing to do. So the one thing I want to do here is, if we look at all cards in neutral, can we get to the beginning of neutral here? Do I have any spells at all? So I'm going to look at the bottoms of each of these cards and see if any of them don't have health and attack on them for neutral cards. I guess not. I guess this has been a consistent thing since the beginning. The neutral cards were all enemies, and I've just forgotten that. So there's definitely some interesting things. I definitely needed to rebuild all of my decks, so I'm gonna have to do that. I want to try out adapt. I want to probably improve my beast deck very much. If you're making a beast deck, doing this card in particular would probably be very helpful still. So I want to try adapt. I want to try the quests. I want to see if there's some crazy strategies I can think up. I really don't think there is too much craziness here, though. Even with the elemental adds, and until we find out what the quests and adapts really do, that's the question. And see, now we are at page 135 of all the cards available, and it's only getting bigger and bigger. as we go. Now, as far as standards, you're only at page 117, so there's about 18 pages of, so 180 cards right now are banned from regular play, and that's going to get bigger once they ban Blackrock Mountain and Grand Tournament, and that's going to happen pretty soon here. And then the Hall of Fame is the new rewards thing, so they've changed the name of this. And so the only way you can get these cards are crafting them with dust. And so since that's the only way you can get them, it's also probably the biggest things you should get. Try to get them, at least. But you can only play them in Wild anyway, so if you're going to play in Standard, you might get it. You might not bother with that. And of course, Nyxramus cards and Goblins vs. Gnomes cards all have to be made with dust too if you want to play in Wild. So as time goes on, less and less people are going to want to play in Wild. So the time has changed, and so we have this Welcome to the Jungle, play 30 Hunter class cards quest, and I can't open these yet. So since I can't open these, that means I won't be, for the live stream, opening card packs today. Tomorrow it should be the expansion, and so we are done looking at the neutral cards. I hope you enjoyed it. So when the new expansion comes out, we will be opening 55 plus packs. Maybe I'll get one more pack, using 5,000 gold to do that. And by my estimations, that should give me about half of those cards that we just looked at. And we will be doing deck rebuilds for the rest of the day, and I will be live streaming all of that, so catch that when it happens. Sorry, I'm suffering from insomnia far too much to say an exact time. Ideally around noon when it unlocks, potentially 12 plus hours later if that's when I get around to it. Here I've gotten a friend invite, and I'll deal with that in a second. That's it for the neutral cards. I hope you enjoy. As always, I ask you to like, stay for a little bit of wrap up on the live stream, and I'll answer the questions that have been coming in fast and furious, and comments. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe. Click that bell next to the subscribe button on YouTube to get notifications. Comment and watch every second of my videos, because all of that helps me with YouTube, tells them that my videos are worth watching. If you want to friend or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, Steam, or Battle.net, or now called Blizzard, I have all of those links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.